guys. So this is a Springer Custom Works 90-degree trigger for the VSR. One of my favourite products. Anyone who's been following me knows that I use these religiously. Anything that I can put one of these in, generally speaking, I will put one in. All of my VSRs, beside maybe two, have got a Springer Custom Works trigger of some sort. This is the latest V9.3, which is what I'll be putting in my main VSR. Nothing wrong with the trigger I've got in there. I've got a 9.2 at the moment, and I've had that for however long. But I'll use that for another build, and I'll put this in. So as I said, this is the 9.3 VSR version. And opening it up, you get the trigger, which is in a little bubble wrap package. You get your screws in here, which are your mounting screws and your safety screw and two crush rings or shims. You get a little piece of paper in here as well that basically gives you some information on what screws to use, what product you've got, and a QR code that leads to the website. But we can put that to the side. So you're opening the trigger, which to be fair is well packaged. You're greeted with this. So that is the V9.3 trigger, which is obviously a 90-degree trigger. 90 degree being the angle of the sear here. Absolutely astounding quality. Like, I'm pretty sure everything on this is some degree of hardened steel, whether it's the sear or the stopper itself. The trigger on these is lovely and crisp, really nice break point. It is adjustable as well with a small screw in here. That will basically determine how much of a pull you've got. If you set it as shallow as you can literally just touch this like that and the sear will release. Sear release itself is very nice and easy. So out of the box, this is set pretty light, I'd say, which again you can adjust if you want to, but I quite like having a nice trigger. So some of the changes I can see from this. So the way the spring guide stopper works, if we go back a step, so this is your spring guide stopper here. On most triggers, this is literally just pushed up and you're relying on the force of the spring against the spring guide to keep this in place. On the Springer Custom Works trigger, this is actually held in by a screw here. So that screw there goes through the side of the trigger housing and through this. So if you're ever changing your cylinder, you're going to want to pop this out. But the benefit of this is this can help with trigger noise or the mechanical noise you get from the trigger. Because when this isn't fixed, this can, what I like to call, jump. Everyone's probably got a different name for it. But if your spring guide doesn't sit against this hard enough, if it hits the back wall of the cylinder before it can fully recess in this little cutout, that little cutout there. So this isn't one of my spring guides. This is some 2-piece 13mm guide. Not one of mine, mine are 1-piece. But to sort of show you what I mean, the spring guide will have this little dimple on the back, and that will sit in this little cutout here. If it sits in nice and flush, then you're not going to get any bounce, provided this sits far enough. Where this goes up inside the cylinder itself, what can happen is if this isn't the correct dimensions, this will sit and hit the rear of the cylinder, but this little section here will not seat fully in here. And sometimes on a VSR, you might not actually fire it, you get like a mechanical clank. You've got perfect seal, everything's tightened, but there's just this little mechanical noise bouncing against this and it's not sitting there properly. But with the Springer Custom Works triggers, he's obviously done a lot of testing to get all of these right, to get the right length, and it works really well. And I've yet to break one of these, and I've been using Springer Custom Works triggers for, I don't know, 2014 maybe, 2015, and I've yet to break one other than a spring, but in a trigger. That's pretty much going to happen all the time. But assembly wise, that just gets pushed in, put your screw in from whichever side you want. Well, from this side with the opening, sorry. Go ahead, snug that down. So that is in there nice and solid. Your safety on this is this little plate here, which slides backwards and forwards. So right now it's off safe, but when you've got your safety installed, when you put it on safe, this slides forward and completely blocks the trigger from releasing. Slide it back and it works. One thing I have noticed, and a little tip I'll give you guys now, is if you're not using the safety, which I know a lot of VSR units and SSG10 users don't, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to slide this plate as far back as it can go. So on here, that's as far as it will go. And then you're going to want to just snug these two screws down, because if you're not using a safety, the vibrations of the rifle, if these aren't tightened, can ever so slightly make it just nudge forward a little bit, just a small amount, but that is enough to give you an inconsistent trigger break, and if it goes all the way forward, you're going to have to take the whole thing apart just to get your safety out, to move your safety. Installation is going to be the reversal of how you got your 45 out, so you're just going to pull the trigger off, two screws front and back, take them off, take your old trigger and your spring guide stopper out, put in your upgrades, which for this trigger is going to be a 90-degree piston, whether that's mine, Edgy, Action Army, etc. Just anything that's a decent 90-degree piston will pair well with this. In this little bag here, you're going to have two trigger screws, two little crush rings, and a little brass stopper with a small round head screw, which is for your safety. That is going to sit in here once you've put your safety on. For me, I'm not going to be using that. Next up, you're going to have these two screws with these two little crush rings. They basically go one in the front, one in the rear. So put your crush ring on your screw. That's going to go in the front. Do the same thing for the rear. Now, depending on what level of disassembly you have your VSR, if you've not got your cylinder in it, then you are going to need to take the spring guide stopper out, put your cylinder in, and then pop your spring guide stopper in. If your cylinder's already in, then you can just put the trigger on and just push this up. So that will basically end up in there. One other thing that I like about these, and it's ironic it comes up today because I was having a problem with this with a VSR I was building the other day, is on some receivers for VSRs, for whatever reason, the cutout where this sear would sit, so you'd think of the bottom of your receiver, you've got a cutout where this is stationary but your cylinder slides over it so that the piston can catch it. Some triggers and some of those channels are a bit narrow, so if you've got a trigger where the sear is almost a square face without any kind of taper, you'll get a weird mechanical sound. And what that is when that sear, so if you imagine the sear's upright and it closes, there should be a gap this wide and the sear will just close and it won't make any contact. So sear will be there, you'll shoot, it will flick down and it will flick back up. This gap on some receivers, some clones, some Maple Leaf, it seems inconsistent. I've had 3 receivers from the same company and it's different. But if this is just a bit narrower, what happens is when that sear releases, it clips and it just goes, it just taps it on either edge and you'll hear just an annoying, frustrating mechanical clunk. Again, everything's done up tightly, you've got perfect seal, etc. There's no reason for it to happen, but you'll get a clunk sound. And as I said, it could be the spring guide stopper not meshing correctly with the back of a spring guide, or it is this sear here. So this sear, it's got a taper on each edge, so it's sort of going up like this. That is to basically make sure that when that sear drops down as the piston passes and then flicks back up, it's terrible. Anyone who skips this video now is going to be like, what is this guy doing? But basically, by removing these edges or chamfering them, you're reducing the chance that sear could potentially hit the receiver and give you that mechanical clunk sound. So I can't remember if that's on the 9.2 or not. I feel it might be. Not as to a sharper degree as this though, but it is a very welcome change and it is going to allow for that QC or tolerance issues that you can see between VSR and SSG10 receivers. But that's essentially it. Like, it's obviously it's a very complicated, not a hugely complicated piece of equipment, but it's sturdy, it's well built, and for me it's reliable and it fits. The only thing that you have to change is if you're using a VSR receiver that uses biggest, I think these are M3, and I think some receivers, I think the SSG10 uses an M4 screw. So if you want to put this on a receiver that uses the larger screws, you've just got to tap these holes out or drill these holes out a little bit more because they're designed for, I'm pretty sure it's M3, but you're just going to need to widen them for an M4, but otherwise it will fit and it will work. But that's it, guys. That is the Springer Custom Works V9.3 trigger, which are out now. I think they've been out a couple of months. I got this one a month ago, maybe just over, but this is going in one of my personal VSRs. In fact, it will be going in the VSR I did the reel on the other day. Truly one of the best triggers out there. For me personally, I've used a lot of other triggers and I've always had some form of issue, whether it's durability, fitment, weird mechanical sounds. But for me, this Springer Custom works currently. You know, it could always change. Something better might come out, whether it's a better version of this or whether someone else makes one. But for me personally, I still stand by the fact that this is one of the best triggers out there, which is backed up by the fact that I've used them for so long. It's not like someone's just throwing some money and said, I'll say that's the best. I have consistently used these triggers in all of my builds, and you can go back and check that. So there's no favoritism here beyond the fact that I just think these are very well built triggers. Not to say that the other ones aren't good. Like, I like Maple Leaf triggers for the price. If someone's on a budget, the Maple Leaf 90° trigger is quite a good stopgap. But I just think that these are borderline indestructible. And the guy who makes them, the guy over at Springer Custom Works, he is just a lovely guy as well. I've known him for years now. He's just super nice, super helpful, really enjoys what he does, very, very talented. And he's humble. Like, for someone who's built such incredible parts over the years, he's still very, very humble, always open to feedback, and just an all-around nice guy. So not only do I support the product itself, but I support him as a person and as a company. I think he's doing a very good job for the community, and he is just a very, very pleasant guy to deal with. So if you are in the market for an upgraded trigger, whether it is a VSR or I think he does Type 96 triggers, he does a lot of bespoke triggers for the Ares rifles like the M200s, which are a bit of a pain to get. So if you are in the market for an upgrade trigger, Springer Custom Works is definitely one that I would personally recommend. And again, you can go look at my blog. I've used them in loads of builds, and I've never had a problem with them. So hope that's a bit of information for you there, guys. You might see this trigger again in another VSR build that I'm doing, which is going to be a Simon CM701, which is actually just behind me. But yeah, I'll be using one of these triggers in that, so keep an eye out for it. And yeah, hope you liked it, guys.